So there's so many times where you can think back in your own memory, or you can see it reflected when you go into a classroom and you see a poster of the scientific method. And it's just one method that is presented, but there isn't just one method. There are some aspects of this process that are repeated, but they're repeated in different ways. And it's not a linear, like, first you develop your question and then you do your research on that. Sometimes questions come from you're doing some research, but you just keep having this idea like, but why does this happen? So you're doing research first and then a question happens. Or maybe you're working on a current problem and you're thinking, you know, this is what we're finding, this leads us to here. So at Berkeley, they've been working on this big project of understanding science, and they've developed this nice model where there's still the steps of questioning and observation and doing research and peer review and all of this, but it's much more of a circular model, and it isn't even linear around the circle. It's all the time the arrows are going back and forth. And I think that that's really, really, really important to drive home with students.
How to get that together. And
yeah, but then we can't hear you when you yell.
So we've adopted what's called a learning cycle. It's based on the Berkeley Lawrence Hall of Science model. It starts with an invitation, which is essentially your hook. How do you get a group of 5th or 6th graders really excited? And that's pretty short and sweet. And then it moves into an exploration stage, so these kids are actually going out and doing something before they're really learning any of the content or terminology. Then we go back and discuss maybe a little bit of vocab. It's called a concept invention phase. The instructors will introduce a little bit of content, but the goal there is that the students are taking this little bit of information mixed with what they found during their exploration phase and building these new ideas on their own. Then they apply this knowledge. In this case, that's what Ned is doing right now. They've learned about forces, they've learned about the strength of triangles and engineering, and they're building this giant dome. So that's what the application is here. And then when they're done with that, and they have a giant dome done, or in any other situation, they'll sit down and do some reflection. That could be a silent journaling activity or a discussion. So trying to keep with those 5 stages keeps the kids on task. They're never being lectured at for very long. They're constantly going from a little bit of content to actually doing something hands-on, and just by using that method, we found a lot of engagement from students.
It looks like they're getting smaller and smaller.
And one of the things that we find is kids come to the table with so many pre-existing ideas about what science is based on their school experience. So a lot of times that looks like following directions, trying to get an answer, having it be really directed and not open-ended. And so in our work with elementary kids, part of our work about informal science and getting them to be engaged in and like science is to think about it totally differently than how they've experienced it in school. And even for adults, they have many more years compounded of stereotypes against what science is, and like Dale had said, whether that fits for them, whether they identify themselves as someone who can learn science. So when we approach science and out of school, we have a lot of background that is often negatively associated with what science means. So our approach is so different from how they've experienced science in school, is really to be exploratory, to observe our surroundings, to ask questions. So we feel that out of school has much less of those constraints and allows the freedom to really explore science the way we think it should be explored. In the museum, in a library setting, in an after-school program, it's more about the experience and less about the outcome and about the grades and about doing it right or doing it wrong. Kids should see the facilitators not as the answer books, but as a place to help them find more information and put the effort back on the students for them to investigate and collect more information. So the word facilitator is true in what it means for us. We are guides for students to explore and to find their own information, but not to be the ones to give them the answers. So we always can say, what do you notice about what you're doing? And kids might say something that sounds definitive. I know that this is the right answer, or I know that this is the truth. And a facilitator can say, well, how do you know that? Can you show me? What is it that you did that led you to that conclusion? You can also ask, what if you try it this way? And give a different spin on something to push their knowledge and their exploring in a different direction. So getting kids to reflect and then think about something in a new way, but having the student bring to the table their ideas, their experiences, and have them try something new, the facilitator is then just guiding the students in a different direction.
But there's something I see different though on this one. Do you see, you do have a weight.
Oh, you do have a
The
weight.
markers are like a weight, right?
Where else? You saw them like throwing them up and coming down. How else could they have tested?
There are challenges that we can pose to kids, and there are many different ways that they could go about exploring that challenge, and there's no right way or place to end up. And what we're really hoping is that they engage in the process of testing and trying and repeating and learning. And so it's not about making the perfect long arm that picks up this piece of this book or whatever it is. It's really about the process of thinking, constructing, realizing that something's a little bit off and how do I address that, and thinking critically. And it's all about that process is really what we think is the essence of that science learning.
Well, that doesn't really help anything. Well, it kind of, if you like attach another string.
Just thinking about that very beginning step of how science is in our world is where we're trying to go, and have people be interested and ask questions about their surroundings. That's the essence, I think, of science, especially in an informal way. So I've found that when working with librarians and library staff, when you show them that science is as basic as observing your surroundings and asking questions, that allows them to feel like a scientist or embrace science and engage in it. And I think that's allowed us to really break down some stereotypes and some barriers and allow them to be advocates for science and suddenly realize that maybe it's nothing like what they thought it was based on previous experience.
Can I see the eel?
Never seen anything like it before. Not a moth this big.
Why don't you guys dig?
Peace.